So, hello everyone. Welcome back on the AgriAdventures channel. This is Simone Berliat, and today we're going to have one or new special episodes, the tricks and tips of gardening correlated with AgriAdventures. And today we have with us Rachel McMillan. Hi.
Hello.
Hello. So how you can see a beautiful garden over there. And my always boring AgriAdventures logo on my back. And Rachel, for who's following us and for knows a little bit about the AgriAdventures platform, she should be known because she hosts an edible garden tour experience on the platform. If you've been coming with us in one of our tours, you definitely know her too. But for who doesn't follow the platform and is curious, Rachel, she's a professional in hospitality. She's working many years in the industry. And then she decided to move when she came here in South Australia. She decided to move in production. What you guys you're doing, you're producing edible flowers and herbs and some natives for the restaurant markets. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. There's quite a demand for all of those. So we sort of juggle between doing those different ones. And we also do some garden design as well, which you can see is evident at Penny's Hill Winery. Any garden that we're doing obviously has a design to start that.
Okay. So how long have you been producing or working with gardens in your lifetime?
On a professional level, about 15 years, but I certainly dabbled before that. And I think most people who are professional gardeners or producers in any way, a lot of us have been brought up in gardens. My mum and dad, we lived in the country, we produced our own food. So a lot of it's been learnt from, being a young girl living in the country. But then I, as you said, moved into hospitality and moved away from actually working in gardens at all. And I've slowly gone back into what I really enjoy the most. Several other businesses that I've had and hospitality management roles. But this is something that I'm really passionate about and something that I really love doing. So McMillan Drew started at the beginning of 2020, and Sarah and I, Sarah Drew, my business partner, her and I are focused on the production side of things and designing. So we spend most of our time, luckily, out in beautiful gardens and around the Fleurieu Peninsula, out with the fresh air and where we want to be.
Exactly. It's definitely a colorful business, if I can say.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you were speaking about Penny's Hills Winery, where we have pictures at the back end where you've been based so far, where you have your production, and there is another location where you do the production with Sarah. And for this episode, the interest was, I think it was really interesting to share a bit more about what is seasonal in terms of edible flowers and herbs, or if it's not seasonal, what is mildly used and available for people, and some possible recipes that we could use these ingredients, or some tricks on having them, working fine in the garden. Some of them, they are really, really peculiar, if you want to use the word, to be grown. And obviously, we don't want to have a garden design. That is your job. So then they can speak with you if they want to have a nice garden design. But, this interesting information that for us that we are used to the classic veggies from the supermarket, that will be really, really interesting. Like in the tours, we have seen many people really interested to discover these plants that they sometimes consider it more the pests in the garden than actually being used. And so it would be nice if you have any examples or any flowers or products that they are available now to share with the people that's following.
Okay, I guess seasonality is an interesting thing. It depends on the weather. And so particularly for the last 2 years, it's been a bit cooler. I think we're all finding that summer is starting a little bit later. So when we're talking about something that's in season, it can actually change from year to year and, you know, from week to week. So for instance, if we get a bit of a cold spell and then a hot spell in the middle of summer, it can send things to seed and to flower, you know, very quickly. So it can push things out of season very quickly. Because we're a commercial garden, what we're trying to do is extend those growing seasons. So a nasturtium is a good example of something that normally at the moment you can't really grow a lot of them. They're more sort of winter, springtime, when it starts getting cooler again. So at the moment, and just today, for example, I was rung by one of my distributors that one of the chefs that we're supplying wants as many nasturtium flowers as possible, which I think is, you know, literally hundreds. So I popped into the garden to see what we had, and I have some. I couldn't meet that whole order, and I'm talking to some other growers around the place, but most people aren't growing nasturtium flowers at this time of the year. But we have been pushing the seasons out with them by growing them in shady and cooler areas within the garden. We need to water them all the time. We need to make sure that they don't have caterpillars on them. That's something that at this time of the year, there's a lot of white fly around and different caterpillars. So for us, nasturtium is something that we can actually grow year round because we're pushing those seasons out. There's a whole lot of flowers that definitely will not grow at certain times of the year, but say for example cornflowers, we're just about to finish those. They've been going for the last 3 months, so we've had them once again in areas that are a little bit more sheltered. We put up some shade cloth over them to try and extend their period out. So at any one time of the year we can supply and grow about 10 to 15 different types of edible flowers. And those flowers, there are some native flowers within that, or flowers from native plants. There's some that people would consider weeds, and there's some that are just standard garden flowers. And going back to the nasturtium, it's a very good example of, I rang a friend who has another property down south, and I was hoping that she might have some nasturtium flowers because they're a little bit cooler down there than where we are. It is Fluorio, but it's quite a bit further south, and she's in a valley with a creek running through it. So she's just that little bit cooler than us. So I was hoping she did. And she's a professional herb grower, has been for probably 30 years. And she said, there's no way I would have nasturtiums in my garden. I couldn't get rid of them. They're a terrible weed. Whereas for me, it's a commercial product. And nasturtium is great because we can sell the leaves in bulk. We can sell them in little punnets that we pick individually to make sure that they're beautiful and they go on a plate individually. We can sell the stems, we can sell the seeds, which can be pickled like capers, and we can sell the flowers. So yeah, it's an interesting plant for us, and some people look at it as a weed, but for us it's definitely a very viable commercial product. But that takes a lot of work to keep that going throughout the year.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, definitely. Being commercial, being a business and commercial, you need to have a sort of stability in the production. Otherwise, you're not going to go anywhere. I mean, you cannot keep changing. And chefs, they like to create new dishes, but they don't like to do that every week.
Yes,
so that's one of the things. Do you think it will be possible to see for people that's following the nasturtius plant?
Oh, sure. I will. So I will share my screen here. Share screen, and hopefully I can locate some flowers. So can you see that there, Simone?
Wow. Yes, I can see, definitely see all the flowers.
Yeah. This here is the punnets that we sent out this week. This is basically, seasonality in a punnet, really, if you're looking at it like this. That's what was in our garden, and that's what we put together, probably about 70 punnets of those a week. So the nasturtium is the orange one there.
Yeah, the orange. And could you tell us a little bit the names of the others?
Yes. Sorry. So the yellow there is fennel. So that's fennel flower, which will then turn into a seed, obviously later. This little white one here is coriander. I wonder if I can zoom in a little bit there. Yeah. So that is coriander here. And you know, if people are wondering what they taste like, they pretty much taste like what the herb does. So any herbs that you're growing, if they have a flower, the flower is edible. The advantage of the flower is they often have nectar down in the base of the flower. So you get, say with nasturtium, it's that pepperiness, but because it has nectar in it, then you get a little sweet bit at the end.
Yes.
So these ones are sweet. That's a little bit harder to see. That is a pineapple sage there. So
pineapple.
A pineapple sage, so a salvia, a type of salvia.
Okay.
Yeah. So that one has a lot of nectar in it. We often have to make sure that the ants aren't in that. The same goes with the nasturtium flower. We have to get the ants out because the ants love the nectar, and they are obviously, you know, pollinating. So that's what the ants are doing, running around there. But that one is particularly, you know, it's got a nice sort of savory flavor, but then a really, really sweet bit at the end.
Yep.
This purple one here is a cornflower. So that one, generally when chefs serve that, it goes, they break that up into lots of little flowers and serve that. We can also see in here some rocket. Where's the rocket? That's rocket there. I can show you a better picture of that later. We've got some cosmos here. We've got snapdragon, a little bit of a listener. Cosmos is a beautiful, it's more sort of autumn through to spring flower. It's a lovely big, they come in whites, pinks and burgundies. I can see if I can find some pictures of cosmos there. It's easier.
On the cake, that's fine.
So that's on a cake. That's a young lady in Wollonga. That's our flowers. So you can see there, that's the cosmos. It's a beautiful big, you know, vibrant flower with quite a sweet flavor. So that's the other thing that does define what we do as well, whether things are sweet or savory. So all of these flowers can be used for sweet. The borage here, that's a very popular one that I would say is more savory, but it's cucumber flavor, as you've tasted yourself. Or some people have some other ideas what it tastes like, but that can be lent to savory because it's not a very strong flavor. Here we have cornflower, violas, which is our most popular product. So you wouldn't, for example, put on a chive flower like this, very, very strong chive flavor, and that would obviously wreck the taste of a lovely cake. So yes, they all have you know, quite different flavors to each other, and I think that's definitely something that's changed since we've gone into the business. Is originally flowers and garnishes were not necessarily edible and or palatable, but now they are often very much part of the flavor of a dish. And we sort of, this is here at Aurora. Aurora actually do use our nasturtiums. That was kangaroo meat, cured kangaroo meat in spinach with a nasturtium flour. And the nasturtium flower is to be eaten with the dish. It's not just meant to be just a garnish.
Exactly. That's one of the things that I really like about the flowers, but also I really like about the whole concept, which is the flowers. They are starting to be really, as you said, part of the experience. Yes. They're not just decoration anymore. And then we had the opportunity when coming and visiting and testing these flowers directly from the garden. They have a big impact on the dish. They're not just a side. A lot of time people think that they are so delicate. No, you have to be careful how you use them. So there is a knowledge that has to be built or is already available for chefs to how use these ingredients.
Yes, yeah. I've just found here a picture of the nasturtium seed pods. And that's how we actually sell those commercially. takes quite a long time to pick those, but they can be then pickled. And they need to be really picked at the right time, because otherwise they can end up too tough. But they're picked just at the right time of the season, and they're beautiful, crunchy, peppery, just such a lovely flavor.
So can I ask you, you have, when you work with the chefs, do you have a little bit of open brackets for you propose them to have something that it's available now? Like you speak about the nasturtium seeds, they have a specific time on which they have to pick up, otherwise they get harder. This is normal. Seeds, they have to get dry. So chefs are open for you to suggesting, or simply they are pointing out, I want to have that color, I want that flavor, and that's it?
It depends on the chef, and it depends on the establishment. If the menu is very flexible, there's some places that will just take whatever we can send them that's in season, and they'll be able to use that. With my previous business, we had a closer relationship with chefs in the Flurio, but now that I work with distributors, it's not so easy to do that. But we're getting to the point now where we know that there's a certain amount of restaurants that will just take what is fresh. And it takes a lot of courage, I think, for chefs to be able to do that, and also a lot of knowledge. I think generally chefs that are in a position to do that have had that experience of really working with a garden, and not just doing sort of top to tail like they do with meat, but really flower to root, and being able to use every part of the flower. And some chefs, and it's a small amount, but it is growing, are really excited just to get a new ingredient and something different that they can put on the plate. But generally it wouldn't be bigger places. It's more fine dining with degustations, so that it can be just changed, and it may be the same dish, but the garnish is changed, or some part of that flavor is changed. But the other thing that we do, another thing that a lot of people do, for instance, Matolo, I know that they use some of our produce, a lot of pickles, a lot of things that are prepared. So they'll take whatever we have at the time, and then they'll pickle it, or they'll preserve it in some way so that it can be used at a later stage. So that's definitely not so much with the flowers, but with any other parts of the plants. We've got at the moment purslane, or portulaca, or pigweed, some people may call it. I don't know that I've got any photos of that, but that is going to the botanic, and I'm not quite sure what they're doing, but I'd be guessing that he's actually pickling that. But it's also beautiful fresh as well. It's not dissimilar to the sort of flavor of here. We've got the disfimmer, or the small leaf pig face. That's like a nice crunchy, really juicy, succulent flavor. And so there's lots of things in the garden that are being taken and used in different ways. They're not always necessarily being used fresh. They're preserved often to make things last out for that menu, which may only be a couple of weeks before they change it. And I note now that when you go out, even to the top restaurants, you so often aren't given a menu that's in a nice leather bound folder or whatever. You're given a piece of paper, because that it's been printed that day for you. It's an individual menu, and it's just changing all the time. And they're quite broad as well. A lot of the times they're not as specific anymore. So we were somewhere recently, and they would just have oyster, green apple, mint. And then you can just add whatever else you want to it. So it kind of leaves it open for the chef for interpretation on the day and what the availability is. And I think that's a very important part of having, a flexible menu, is to be able to adapt to the seasons, because it doesn't matter what we do to try and extend our seasonality. If you get a locust plague, which there was one this summer, if you get unexpected hail and you don't have everything under shade cloth, cold snaps, hot snaps, it can just wipe out a lot of stuff unexpectedly. There's all sorts of things that can go wrong. So having that flexibility with the way that you word your menu and educate your staff is really important to be able to use, you know, these sorts of beautiful products seasonally and use them well. I think, yeah, having that flexibility.
Absolutely. And also I think that for a chef that his passion is to create flavors, be able to change after his palate, maybe can be even a journey of learning how to use these ingredients. So it's definitely a good opportunity and a good sign. When I get into restaurants that they have huge menus with tons of ingredients, I'm always aware about that. They are not able to have all these ingredients fresh.
Yes.
Generally, they work with frozen products. And if I go to a restaurant, it's because I want to have an experience. So I generally try to get into restaurants that they have small menus, but they can give me this experience that is more local and more seasonal. Now we are back here, and I was actually looking to ask you, apart than flowers, because it's a little bit uncommon to having them going in a meal, but I know that there are other plants, herbs, or that they are considered grass to throw away. Do you have any over there that are available and that the people could be interested to know more about, like weeds that we think weeds, but they are just weeds because we're used to consider them something that we can't eat, but they are edible?
Yeah, well, as I said, you know, the portulaca, that's definitely one that people are pulling out of the garden all the time. It was quite ironic this season that I had a viola bed that was finished because it was too hot. And there was a lot of it coming up in that garden. And I was literally ripping it out, starting to weed it out. And somebody rang me and said, can you do it in bunches? So that is one that we've got. I think everybody's got it in their garden at the moment. And you can just pick that up out of the garden, rinse it off and chop it up into a salad. It's got a great crunch. It's really juicy and super high in omega-3s as well. So really healthy for you. Dandelion is another one that people would consider to be a weed. We have that coming up a lot in the garden. I try and let it, you know, grow in areas that it's not going to take over too much, because I like to add it to my own salad. I really enjoy bitter greens, having worked in a garden for a long time. I think some of us have that palate. Some of us sort of need to relearn that palate, but eating bitter greens is just part of my normal diet. And I really like the dandelions and the chicories and things like that. And they're things that self-seed in our garden all the time. Over the summer period, what else would we have? Plantain is coming along now. So that's got quite a mushroomy flavor. Fat hen is another one. Fat hen is beautiful. It's really quite, it's a very tender leaf and it's got a very faint earthy mushroom flavor. So that's a great one. And then going in,
because they can even give texture.
Yes,
we don't think, but they can add texture to the dish.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think, you know, looking at the winter period, one that people pull out of their garden all the time is stinging nettle. It is so flavoursome, so yummy. It's a little bit hard to handle, but so you have to wear gloves.
I know a secret technique how you can handle them without using gloves.
How's that?
So the different recall stings on the plant, they're all facing upward.
Yes.
So if you start to holding them from the bottom and then you pull up, you won't sting your finger.
Oh, right. Okay. I didn't know that.
I was doing that when I was little. The first time, obviously, I got stung. And then I learned. And then you simply can, when you hold them, you do like this. And then they come off without stinging you. Obviously, over there, you pick 1, 2, or 3. You're not going to go around doing this action. It's not really practical.
Yeah.
But if you have it in your garden and then you don't have it available, don't worry. And also, in case you get stung, the sting itself is really good for your circulatory system, for your blood system.
For circulation, yeah.
But it's sort of not pleasant, but definitely you're not going to die. Okay. And
well, the same when you eat it. When you actually eat it, it's really good for your circulation. It's recommended for people who have gout. So whether you actually have it on your skin or whether you consume it, it actually is really good for you in any way. But it's probably, I would prefer to eat it in a nice ravioli or something.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's probably one of the most popular weeds, I would say, these days. I think you see that on a lot of menus, and beautiful soups. But then I think about things like sorrel as well. We've got quite a few different types of sorrel that can be considered to be a weed, but for us, it's a commercial product that we sell 30 bunches of every week. So, and then, you've seen my garden, you've seen the horseradish and you've seen the artichokes. I never planted them there. They came in the soil from another property.
Okay.
And they take over. They absolutely take over. But they're fantastic vegetables. Horseradish is delicious, but once you've got it in your garden, if you've allowed it to get into other parts of the garden, it completely can take over other plants. So for us, even though it is a commercial product, we don't do it on that scale. So for me, horseradish is actually a weed, and artichokes to a certain extent as well, but their flower is actually edible too. So for us, that is, we harvest them and then we just keep the artichokes for ourselves because they're so tasty.
Yeah.
But the first season that we moved, we actually put in a garden that I had students dig up from a previous property, and they brought it over, and I didn't realize that they were digging up the artichoke bed. And probably in a 20 square meter garden, we got 100 kilos of Jerusalem artichokes. So that's, I probably should define that for people. It's not the globe artichoke, which is the traditional, people would think is an Italian artichoke where you pickle or eat the inside of it. This is...
And you use the flowers instead, while the Jerusalem artichoke, you use the roots.
Yeah, exactly. And as I said, you can eat the flower, but generally it's the root that's eaten, and it can be eaten raw or roasted, and then it's really sweet, really delicious. So yeah, it's just all relative. It's what you want, and it's what you want in your garden and what you appreciate and what you have knowledge about as well. And the only stuff that I really look at as real weeds in my garden are things like kikuyu, different grasses that I constantly pulling out and are very hard to eradicate. So it's all relative to what you want.
So you're opening a small topic, which is really interesting, because speaking about plants, there is definitely an interaction between plants, and they are living creatures that they can be really competitive against each other. So if you don't have somebody that has the experience like you guys, that knows how to put one or the other, and the type of soil is going to be a little bit of a mess up. Generally, people spend a lot of time without being happy about the outcome for the first time. Yeah.
I think, there's a lot of elements that you need to look at, but soil is obviously a very, very important part. It's a basis, it's what they all come from. So having really good soil structure is so very important. And how do you achieve that? Like, it's not often that you go into gardens anywhere in South Australia. I would think that you can just put in, you can't just grow vegetables. You need to do something with the soil. Our soil is not made for that. Yes, they're made for natives, which have different requirements. And in saying that, if you're just happy to eat, native plants, mum trees and the beech bananas and the different pig faces and stuff like that, that's great, but there's not many people wanting
are those edible then?
Yeah.
Oh, so do you have any? Could we see some of them?
Do I have any pictures of them?
Pictures, and do you have any available in your garden?
I've got saltbush. I've got the two different types of pig face, which is the small leaf pig face and the large pig face. We had some mum trees in, but the rabbits came and ate them, unfortunately.
Now they are super rabbits.
Yeah. Very chunky little rabbits they are.
So can you share the screen so they can see? Because a lot of people, especially the ones that they are not into food or into natives, they don't even know what they look like.
Okay. Well, I don't have a huge amount of pictures of our natives here, but here's a couple. So this is saltbush. This is old man saltbush. There's lots of different types of saltbush, and you and I have spoken several times about, you know, why it's important to know botanical names of different plants, because this one, for instance, can get mixed up quite easily with other saltbushes. The leaves are edible. You wouldn't necessarily eat them raw. You could, but they actually have very small salt crystals on the outside of the leaves. So when you eat them raw, they're quite salty, but they're quite astringent as well. So these are normally cooked like you would, say, baby spinach. Just saute a little bit of olive oil. Definitely you don't need to add salt. And they keep their structure. They don't break down like baby spinach leaves do. So they've got a really, really nice texture when they're eaten, and they're great just to stick a little branch in, for instance, if you've got a roast chook or some roast vegetables, and just cook it up, and the flavour sort of goes into whatever you're cooking it with. So this is Atriplex nummularia. And then there's a coastal saltbush, which we're actually doing some tests on at the moment, because that grows more in this area, because I live in Port Wollonga. So all along the beach down here, there's the coastal saltbush growing, whereas this one that we see in the picture here is more sort of from northern areas in South Australia. So it grows very well here, but the coastal saltbush grows at 3 times the rate, which is quite amazing. And from what we understand, it has a higher protein content too. So, you know, really, really high in protein, this saltbush. So once again, these plants are, you know, they take everything that they can from the natural environment. They're, you know, endemic to South Australia, and they just are highly nutritious. You just need to know how to prepare them. Here I am harvesting some beech bananas, is the word that's used in restaurants. You might see that on menus. Disfima crassifolium is the botanic name, or small leaf pigface. And if I go back to some other pictures here,
I think I've seen the beech banana actually on a lot of beaches around South Australia. Like,
for sure,
you can find them over there. You could simply pick them up and give a wash and use them.
Yeah, it's just amazing. I have eaten beech banana, and samphire is another one, in some of the driest places, like in the middle of January, and they're still crunchy and flavoursome and not overly salty. And they just grow out of rocks, you know, it's just incredible. They just need a little bit of moisture to keep going. This is ours that we have grown specifically for flowers, grown in trays of a light soil and sand. So these ones flower profusely, and they've got, you know, they're lovely and green, beautiful flowers. But if you see them, for instance, if you go over to, you know, the Eyre Peninsula and you're in, you know, you're there in January, February, they can be quite red, like the leaf foliage can be quite red, almost a dark purple, because they just have a very different mineral you know, composition after spending all that time in the beating sun and not getting as much moisture. But it's amazing how flavoursome they still are. So these would definitely, you know, these are quite diverse and can be grown in lots of different areas. Let's see what else I've got pictures of here. I don't think I've got too many other native pictures. I did have some munt trees. Oh, I'm going to have to scroll very quickly to see if I can find those. Oh, here's ice plant. That's an interesting plant. This is actually from South Africa. It's often sold as a Australian native, but it's not. It's naturalized here, which means it doesn't really take over that much. That's its flower. And this is its foliage when it's, you can see like all the little ice crystals on there, hence its name, ice plant. Another succulent, something that can you live in, you know, really poor soils, but just still tastes great. It actually takes salt out of soil as well, so it can be beneficial. And that's beautiful. That's really tasty. Oh, here's your muntries, and there we go. So that's muntries, Kunzia pomifera, a little fruit. It's a ground cover. In the Flurio, there's certain sections where you can find, 20 square meters of it growing in some of the conservation parks, and just eaten directly off the bush like that. And it's hard to tell from that scale, but that, say, for instance, would be the size of the tip of my little finger. So they're only tiny, only about 5 millimeters across, but very sweet, very yummy, and no big seed or anything that you have to chew around. And while we're in this section, this here is another Australian native, native violet, or Viola hirtoracea. The whole plant is edible here again. The leaves are edible, but not overly tasty. I'd only sort of eat those if I was a little bit desperate. But the flowers are a lovely decoration, and they're quite. They don't have a huge flavour, but they actually flower all year round, and it's a really, really hardy plant. It'll just come back year after year with a little bit of water. So we grow quite a few of those, and they're really good for us to, as I was talking about earlier, having seasonality. You can see here what they look like in a punnet. So,
oh, nice,
yeah. So they're a really good one, for sweet flavorings, because they can be treated in that way as well. So
definitely. And it's actually really nice the fact that having native plants in your garden doesn't require you to change the whole ecosystem, just to grow your own fancy European varieties when you have such interesting ingredients that they are available at almost less than zero, because they are everywhere. They grow much better in the environment. They don't have big issues with eucalyptus trees that they are kind of nasty.
Yeah, I'm seeing here, look, here's a whole heap of those things I was talking about before. I'm glad I found those. So this here is your purslane. This is what's growing in everybody's gardens now, and they're pulling it out. This whole stem can be eaten. Sorry, that's not quite in focus, but basically the whole plant can be eaten. And then the seed can actually be ground down. So they've got a tiny little seed, like a little black poppy seed. So when these dry out, you can shake them, shake it out. And if you've got the time and persistence, you can actually ground that down and make like a flour out of it. So
I was making salads with this plant back in Italy and in Bulgaria too.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. It's definitely overlooked. I actually, when I'm picking in the morning, so we often have 2 big flower picking days, and if I'm hungry, that's what I snack on. I really like it.
That's a good texture. Gives response to the bite. It's not flat. It gives enough experience, I can say.
It's great. So here's a few other bits and pieces. That's your plantain that I was talking about before. This Soursops, that's another one. This is a Soursops flower. Most people think it's just a complete weed, but it's super high in nitrogen. So instead of throwing it out of the garden when we're not using it, we'll just harvest it and throw it back on the garden to go back into the soil. But that can be eaten, the flower right through to the root. So the leaves, everything in between. And a lot of us ate them as kids and kind of were talked out of it. But you see the joy and the pleasure when people actually eat it. It's got that sourness, but it really is quite stimulating. And it's lovely, particularly when you add it in with other dishes as well.
Yeah, well, it will be really nice, and I definitely looking to find someone that will be able to give me more tricks regarding not just the plants and the flavors, but also the interaction of the plant and our health.
Yes.
Because I believe that in the past there was a lot of use of plants for medicament use, and nowadays we lost a lot of this knowledge, or if we haven't, we simply are using much less.
Yeah.
I think it would be really nice because, if you want to have mild, sometimes even not, medicaments for something you have every day, why not growing them in your garden?
Okay, well, I'll tell you something that I read recently, which is very interesting. This here, the dandelion. So dandelion, once again, flower right through to the root. I'm sure a lot of us would have heard of dandelion root tea, which is very flavoursome, very good for the liver. The leaves are good for the liver, cleansing the liver. I read recently that eating the dandelion leaves, the dried dandelion leaves as a tea, drinking it, can stop the COVID protein spikes from attaching to our kidneys and our lungs. So very supportive to the immune system, amongst, many other things too. So this is, there's every plant that you're looking at here on the screen has some sort of medicinal purpose. And this is one of the things that I enjoy so much about when I'm doing the tours, is often the people that come on the tours that we do are very interested in herbs and flowers, and they give me just as much information sometimes that I give them, particularly people from European backgrounds like yourself. You have eaten them as kids. It's not unusual to be gathering them and putting them in your salad, whereas here in Australia we just look at anything that's not a cos lettuce sometimes as a weed. And I think it's really important to change attitude and to look around. Like, I now know, for instance, last year I was over on the Eyre Peninsula. I was saying, like, in January or February, you look around and you think, my God, this place is so desolate, like right next to, the ocean with the strong winds and, and the hot sunshine. There was so much that was edible. And that's through my knowledge and learning from Aboriginal elders as well, who have taught me about what can eat and what you can eat at what time of the year. So having that bit of knowledge is really empowering, actually, and it's certainly great to be able to take my daughter around and teach her those things as well. And it's I think something that should be more part of our education, and we should all be learning a little bit more about it. And there's a lot of information out there. There's so many different ways of learning it these days too.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, I think we can go back on the full screen.
Yep.
Because our time is gone. It really, really quick. I was not expecting that. It was really nice to have you on the AgriAdventures podcast, this new format. And definitely, it's an experience for people who's interested to come along and during the tour, or they can even come just for the edible garden tour experience.
Yeah.
Which is, they can get in contact with you. They can pass through the AgriAdventures platform. That's all good. And they now know what's going to happen over there.
Yeah.
I mean, not completely, like there are still a lot of secrets and things to discover, because really over there you taste things. So you have the option to try and feel and touching. It's more a sensory experience.
Yeah.
I think we should have the next step, what it is cooking with Rachel. That would be fun. We go to do some harvesting or some and then we bring the ingredients back and then we cook something. It will be really cool.
And we better get a glass of Penny's Hill wine too, I think.
Well, that I think it's going to be required. So
Very good.
All right. Thank you very much, Rachel,
Thank
for
you
being
for
with
having
us.
me today. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
And see you again on here.
Okay. All right. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.